Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 100. I'm Igneous, and today we're getting the ship ready to take it on a little trip. And part of that means fixing some things we did in the last episode, and part of it means adding some things that we haven't had on the ship yet and getting those set up for a little bit of a journey. Now, we're really low on combat steel. I've been taking it out of the auto miner. We have one auto miner set up in the last iron deposit on this planet, and I've been emptying it and processing it religiously so that we try and get as much as we possibly can, and it's just not nearly enough to keep up. I spend a lot of time sort of wandering around looking for things to do to keep me busy while I'm waiting for combat steel and all of its subcomponents to process. So I think we're going to be in much better shape by finding a planet with at least 3 available iron deposits and setting up 3 auto miners minimum and doing things that way so that we can have a better chance of keeping on top of things in terms of the materials that we need relative to the materials that we're using. So one of the things that I needed to do was get all the thrusters in place so that this thing is properly mobile. You can see on the left hand side we've got 2 extra large capital vessel thrusters ready to go. And they need a little bit of protection. That's sort of what we're working on now. And we're working in the area in the last episode we were looking at setting up those wings that were kind of extending out and curving down gradually. That was the original goal. And then after messing around with them, it became they were sticking out basically 90 degrees. And then one sloped to 22.5 and then extending out for quite a ways. And then I said, no, we're not doing it like that. I recovered the materials and we're using them now to fill things out in a little bit more of an understated kind of way, almost minimalistic. And the goal here is, much as I discussed in the back of the ship with the thrusters, is to let the thrusters kind of stand on their own in terms of the appearance of things. I like the way that they look, and I don't necessarily need to overshadow them with a ton of hull detail. With the rear thrusters, we set up that bar, that glowing blue bar above the thrusters, which I like. And realistically, it's not especially complicated or especially busy, which is why I was okay with putting it there. But in this case, over on the side, I didn't think I could get away with any more glowing bits necessarily. Probably could have, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I just wanted to first and foremost make sure that the structure supported the protection of the thrusters, so that we can go fly around, go where we need to go, and not be too worried about what's happening to them. You can see that one thruster is sticking way out. We're actually going to remove that and move it in at least 1 block so that it lines up with everything else that's going on around it. So it's a pretty minor modification that I'll make before we leave the planet. There's not a lot that I'm worried about when it comes to ships surviving and being attacked, but when we get into space there can be drones. And they could be, you basically leave the planet and immediately a drone is shooting at you kind of thing. That's one reason for concern, one motivation to be a little bit protective of the critical components. And then when we get to the planet, wherever planet we end up going to, there's the possibility of the omnipresent physics glitch that flings the ship over a mountain and leaves it on its side right next to a point of interest. You never know. It could happen. I've seen my own ships go flying much farther than you would expect them that they would be able to. So we have to keep that in mind as well when it comes to protecting things. It will take damage, it might take damage, so we might as well account for it as best we can. And in this case, with these particular thrusters, it's kind of the spot on the ship where I tend to neglect what's going on a little bit. I'm more interested in what's happening on the front of the ship. It's very easy for me to take damage in certain other places without even realizing it because my focus is elsewhere. So that's why these guys get a little bit of extra attention relative to some of the other thrusters that we're going to be putting in place. And you can see, I kind of like the looks of this, the way it's set up now. We're just going to put in a little partition wall here. And again, this is more protection for the left thruster that's sticking out a little bit farther. By the time we push that in a block or 2, it's going to be well protected. It should be in good shape. It'll survive much easier than if we left it the way that it was. So we're going to duplicate that over onto the other side, and then we come down here. This is my concession to protecting the core of the ship, knowing that I don't have enough materials to close in the top part of the ship is basically the core is, I think it's under the generator. It's either under the generator or directly under the cockpit, one of the two. And I want to make sure that it doesn't get clipped by a stray shot of something, because that would be a tragedy. As soon as I finished placing the blocks on the roof of that little structure, the little hut in the middle, the ship started bouncing around a little bit. And I was thinking to myself, this is why we protect things, because we could go flying at any moment. This is part of the front of the ship that we had done previously. It was one of the details that we had set up as we were working out towards the cockpit area. And this is where I decided that I would like to put the reverse thrusters, a total of 3 reverse thrusters. I don't have enough materials to completely enshroud all 3 of these thrusters. Every once in a while I do something and I look back on what I've done and I think, what the hell did I do that for? This is going to be one of those times. I basically place the one thruster. It's in a good spot. That's basically where it's going to stay. The only changes that will be made is when we have the materials, we'll be building around it so that it's protected. And then I wanted the other 2 thrusters to be on either side of the one we just placed and back 1 block so that it's a little bit staggered. We've got the one middle thruster is sitting forward a little bit relative to the other 2. Simple and straightforward layout for the design. And always in the back of my mind being a little bit thoughtful about how many blocks I'm using and what I'm using them for, because I don't have enough to do everything that I would like to do. So we're kind of making a little bit of effort to set things up properly now, because we know the thrusters aren't going to move. And then I decided that I wanted to come down here and remove all of these blocks. These blocks were actually 1 layer up relative to the thrusters. So they were in position to potentially offer a little bit of extra protection to those thrusters because of their position being 1 up into the plane that the thrusters are on. But I decided, because I have this obsession with protecting from thruster damage in a game that doesn't have thruster damage, that I would knock them off. I would remove them so that if the game patched in thruster damage tomorrow, I wouldn't have to worry about it. And then rather than taking the blocks that I recovered from there and using them on top or on the sides of the thrusters that I just placed, I decided to close in the interior sections where the thrusters are exposed that will never see fire from the enemy ever. And that's what I did. That made absolutely no sense. It happens. There's so many different things going on and decisions being made that it's easy to kind of forget about certain priorities. Those are the rear thrusters. And like I say, this is going to be the final position. So what I'm doing now, because I had it in my mind and I just wanted to kind of get it into the game, was this is the profile that's going to be on top of these thrusters. So I'm putting the basics in place now so that when the time comes when we have the materials to finish closing in the ship properly, this will be the guide that kind of gets us started for this front section of the ship directly above the thrusters, and then moving back towards the farm area where we're going to have all of our plants set up to grow. So that's the reverse thrusters. And now the last little bit that we have to do is the descent thrusters, the ones that push us down. When we're in planetary gravity, we can use gravity to certain extents to bypass the need for these kinds of thrusters, but when we're in space, kind of handy to have, and they afford a little bit of extra control in gravity as well. So I don't mind putting them in now. I think it's worth it. You can see my inventory is absolutely full with all the different utility blocks that I brought with me to finish that part of the ship as well, getting those blocks into place. So I had to go around and pick up every block that I removed in order to make sure that I had enough combat steel to finish what I was doing. So you can see we've got 2 thrusters here. There's going to be 2 thrusters on the other side. It's a little much for descent thrusters, but the way I was looking at it is 2 I wasn't really thrilled about. I thought 2 was not enough. 3 might have been enough, but a little bit more difficult to place on the ship in places where I'd be happy with, because you basically have to have 1 on either side and then 1 in the middle somewhere. Just kind of a pain in the butt. They're not that expensive, so I decided to go with 4, and 2 on either side is a little bit easier to place. And then the one thing that I wanted to avoid is just a rectangular opening for the thrusters. Anytime I've got an opening in the hull for something to stick out, like thrusters or turrets or whatever, I don't really like leaving them as just a plain rectangular opening. So we're just doing a little bit of a detailing using the same number of blocks, but just going with a little bit more of a refined look that I'm quite happy with. And then that'll be the opening, the final opening for the descent thrusters. So the thrusters are in place. I have to put some utility blocks in there, but we're pretty much good to go to get off planet. The next episode will be in whatever planet we end up going to, hopefully set up with auto miners galore, gathering the things that we need, and we're going to continue the build. So if you want to be notified about the next episode and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.